China, a country the size of Europe, with every kind of landscape. Every kind of habitat, every kind of climate, and where animals of many different types rare, exquisite, and endangered live in unique ecosystems, in remote isolation, and alongside people. But today, both these habitats and the extraordinary species who live within them are increasingly faced with challenges. As people race to find solutions, to preserve China's wild beauty. China's vast wetlands, found in every corner of the country, in all terrains, from plain to plateau, coastal regions to inland areas, in temperate and tropical zones, near the summit of mountains, and even in caves carved out below the Earth's surface. Each body of water varies wildly in character. Some are permanent, others seasonal. Some found inland, while others are along the coast and battered by the tides. But these varied and wonderful wetlands together make up one of the most biologically diverse of China's ecosystems. Rich in extraordinary species, aquatic and terrestrial, and plants that have specially adapted to unique soils and fluctuating water levels. The wetlands provide livelihoods for millions of people in China living along the banks and shores, and they also protect them from natural disaster with floodplains, and they halt the effects of climate change through peatlands that absorb and store carbon. And so the value of the wetland system is immeasurable for China's wildlife and for its human population. The mighty Yangtze, Asia's longest river, courses only through China from the Tibetan Plateau to Shanghai. And along the fertile banks of its wetlands and floodplains, over the course of Chinese history, the civilization's most important kingdoms, cities, and culture have flourished. Today, its middle and lower reaches are home to China's most developed economies. But as people flourish, some species unique to this region are teetering on the brink of extinction. Recently, the whole Yangtze River basin has been given special environmental status, with a high standard of protection. But this may have come too late for some species. This Yangtze porpoise, like its cousins, the dolphins and whales, is a carnivore. He is a finless porpoise with no dorsal fin, but found only in the wild in the Yangtze River. He's better known as the Yangtze mermaid, and renowned for his mischievous smile. But he and his species have very little to smile about. There are fewer than 1,000 left in the wild, and without help, he faces extinction within 10 to 15 years.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Scientists are racing against the clock to protect this ancient aquatic mammal. By studying a limited number of specimens, they hope to learn more about this porpoise and his family. And how to save them. The more they know, the better they can protect the entire species and prevent it from vanishing. Freshwater species around the world are declining much faster than their land or sea counterparts. An 80% drop in their populations has taken place in the past 50 years, and the survival of this species could now rest on a close contact study of our porpoise and his friends. Everything they do is recorded and assessed. The experts here are building up the fullest picture yet of how these mammals behave and respond in various situations. They are also in peak physical condition, primed to breed and produce the healthiest offspring possible. This group, or pod of porpoises, is made up of males and females. The female finless porpoise, like all porpoises, are larger in build than the males, and they can carry a single calf every other year. They have a level of intelligence comparable to a gorilla. They're one of the smartest animals. They seem cooperative and keen to communicate with their handlers, as if helping them out in their research efforts. Other initiatives are also underway to boost numbers in the wild. This is Tianzhou Oxbow in Hubei province. Formed just 40 years ago, when a wide meander from the main stem of the Yangtze River was naturally cut off, creating this freestanding body of water. And now, it's home to a select few members of this critically endangered species. They were not naturally marooned here when the lake was first formed, but are part of an ambitious and highly successful breeding program. It all started 30 years ago when 5 injured porpoises were found in the Yangtze. They were nursed back to health, but instead of being returned to the river and subject to numerous dangers, they were relocated to a new home, this Oxbow Lake. And today, those founding 5 members have multiplied into a pod of over 60. About 10 calves are born here every year. The porpoises are flourishing here, but the story in the main flow of the Yangtze couldn't be more different. Many don't make it to sexual maturity, aged 5, and so numbers are decreasing at a rapid rate. Each year during the rainy season, this Oxbow Lake used to reconnect with the Yangtze. And so to prevent seasonal flooding, a dike was built. This also had the added benefit of containing the Yangtze porpoise within the safe confines of the lake, where the marine biologists are able to protect them from the dangers and uncertain future that lies beyond. The ultimate aim for these relocated porpoises is to return them to their river. But this will have to wait until a time when the conditions along the entire stretch of the river, beyond the lake, and even in the farmers' fields, are more favourable for their existence. Today, 20 kilometres of the river is also a designated nature reserve, closed to the public for the protection of the species and to boost fish supplies in the general area. In the Yangtze, these porpoises struggle to find food as a result of overfishing in the area. But the only boats seen here are patrolling the fish supplies. There are no trawlers. In the lake and the nature reserve, the food supply couldn't be better. As every year, large amounts of fish larvae are released into the river system here to maintain a rich resource of fish. This method of conservation is unprecedented. It's a world first, but one that is already proving highly effective in the fight to prevent the species from becoming extinct. The transition for these animals has been seamless. They love it here. But the locals have also had to adapt to a new way of living. Ding Ziliang was a fisherman. But today, he no longer competes for fish with the porpoises, but delivers fish to them. He retired from fishing after strict quotas were imposed in the area, and now uses his knowledge of these waters and the fish for a better purpose. He tenderly looks after the newest arrivals in the lake, helping mothers and their calves with the early stages of life. He feeds a female, and her calf every 4 hours with fish caught sustainably in the Tian'ezhou Oxbow Lake. And this keeps him very busy, as they can consume 5 kilograms of fish a day, about 10% of their body weight. Porpoises can swim at great depths, but like they choose to feed towards the surface. It's early winter. And her infant bob happily to the surface of the water, snatching food. He is her first baby and is 7 months old now, and only recently weaned off his mother's milk. He doesn't yet know how to hunt. He'll start in the coming months using echolocation, a method of understanding his environment through sound and echo. But these are all skills that he can take his time to grasp, as life in the Oxbow Lake is comfortable and safe. And with this regular delivery service, neither of them seem in any hurry to fend for themselves. Further along the river, in the lower reaches of the Yangtze, one impressive wetland species has been brought back from the brink of extinction. The Milu deer. In the late 19th century, the world's only herd of this majestic species belonged to the Qing dynasty emperor Tongzhi. But a series of disasters, flooding and war entirely wiped out China's native population. Then in 1985, 22 Milu living in zoos and wildlife parks in the UK were given to nature reserves in China. And so the Milu deer was brought back to its homeland and placed in cordoned-off nature reserves and breeding centres around wetland areas. But the Milu's fascinating story doesn't end here. In 1998, a flood at a breeding centre caused 30 deer to flee for their lives. And they settled here, on the lower reaches of the Yangtze's wetlands, where they've thrived and multiplied. It's estimated that there might be up to 1,000 Milu living here in the wild. In effect, this colony reintroduced itself back into the wild. It's December and the shortest day in the year. The sun rises over a Milu protected zone on the edge of a willow forest. This group roams silently across the mud flats. Usually segregated by sex, the males are at the front and the harem of females follow. Their broad hooves are perfect for muddy terrain. Their coat is a reddish tan in the summer, but it's changed to a dull grey now that winter's here. This change of colour serves a useful purpose. It helps camouflage the Milu when the winter mists arrive. These deer swim well, spending long periods standing in water up to their shoulders. They're mainly grazers, but supplement their grassy diet with aquatic plants in the summer. It's the autumn rut, or mating season, when bulls fight each other for the mating rights to entire groups of females. Groups of male Milu, called bucks or stags, roam their land and adorn themselves with bracken and grass. They want to look bigger and more intimidating than their rivals. In a muddy puddle, they engage in a flamboyant act called bellowing, throwing back their heads to roar and showing off their thick necks. They smear mud on their chest and legs, blackening their fur. And then they bugle, making a high-pitched whistling noise to warn off potential competition. Their antlers are specifically grown to enhance sexual attraction and to be used as weapons in fights over interested females and even for control of entire harems. It's winter now, and most of the female Milu are pregnant. So the antlers have done their job and promptly snap off. They will grow back again soon, and grow at a faster rate than any other mammal bone, finished off with a thin layer of velvet. The muddy ground is strewn with buck's antlers. This is a busy time for the rangers working here, who collect them all. But equipped with only boots rather than hooves, they're finding the wetland terrain a bit of a challenge. They want to get a handle on the size and age of the population they look after. And they can learn lots from these antlers. Older stags have more branches, with up to 16 points. More than 1,600 kilometers away in South China's Hainan province is a coastal wetland and large mangrove forest, Dongjiagang. Here, all life is affected by the tides. The water rises and falls on a daily basis, alternately flooding the land and then retreating. The seawater is heavy with salt. But each type of mangrove growing on these swampy shores has responded to the challenges in their own surprising way. This is the Bruguiera gymnorrhiza, a black mangrove. Its eerie roots protrude above the ground. There is no oxygen in the mud, so its roots grow above the surface and breathe through pores. Taking in oxygen from the air and then transmitting it way below the surface to the mangrove's deeper roots. The stilted mangrove in this forest is positioned on the front line, closest to the coast. To deal with the impact of waves and the force of the tide, this stilted mangrove grows lots of tall, spindly roots around a central trunk. These make it more sturdy, buttressing the vital central trunk. It stands tall and firm on this muddy bank. And not far from the shore, the Aegisaurus corniculatum, or river mangrove, a type of red tree, has evolved to secrete salt through a complex filtering system that has been acquired over millions of years. They can discharge surplus salt from their body via salt glands on the leaves. Mangroves are engineered like no other species on Earth, and they have a role to play in our survival too, trapping climate-changing carbon emissions and protecting coastal areas from erosion. But the mangroves here also support a vast ecosystem. Living amongst the mesh of mangrove roots, hidden from almost everyone and everything, are some truly exceptional and unique semi-aquatic species. Egrets are circling above the mangrove's canopy. They're looking for food, but most importantly, they're playing a waiting game. The tide has gone out, exposing some of their favourite snacks. Who are now slithering through the mud and scuttling out of burrows in search of their own food now that the waters have gone. Low tide is mealtime for most of the creatures living in this mangrove forest. This sea slug has set his sights on some vegetation. These male and female fiddler crabs shovel sand into their mouths, using a hypnotic rhythm and a style that resembles that of a fiddler on a bow, hence the name. But the couple aren't actually eating sand. They're feasting on microscopic organisms and microbes living amongst the tiny grains of sand. They spit the excess sand back out and roll it into balls. Some experts believe that the feeding habits of the fiddler crabs play a vital role in the preservation of wetland environments. Because as they sift through the grains, they aerate the dense, muddy sand. This couple share this one burrow, and housekeeping is the job of the female in this relationship. She rolls the excess sand that has been spat out away from their underground home. These crabs communicate by a series of unique waves, gestures and lunges. And there's nothing more expressive than the gesticulating of the male using his one oversized claw. He woos his partner by waving this oversized claw, indicating to her that he could build a good burrow for her to incubate her eggs in. He also uses this claw to defend her and their burrow. And incredibly, if he loses this claw in battle, another will grow from the opposite side. The crab's shell can transform in many remarkable ways. In the day, it's dark, and towards the evening, it's brightly coloured. The tide is coming in, so there's only a short window left to feed. A mud skipper is looking for algae. He's an amphibious fish and something of an enigma. Equally skilled at swimming in water and slithering on land. Breathing through his skin only when wet, and with the help of an enlarged gill, where he traps a bubble of air when out of the water. But his most impressive trick is the high jump. This mud skipper has to be careful. Gymnastics like this are sure to attract unwanted attention from the hungry birds hidden in the mangrove forest, circling above the mangrove's treetops and patrolling the muddy ground. He uses his large eyes to watch for activity overhead and quickly retreats into his burrow at the first sign of danger. The fiddler crabs also escape back to their burrows, but here these egrets have many other options to choose from. There's an abundance of food for all wading birds around these mangroves, enough to go around and share with their friends. And today, a visitor lands on these muddy shores, a foreigner washed up from the deep sea. This is the oldest marine creature on Earth, with a history of 300 million years. Chinese horseshoe crabs, also known as living fossils. This couple are in the process of breeding. The female has carried the male ashore on her back. And when the process is complete, she will lay her eggs in the sand. She lays up to 100,000 eggs in batches of a few thousand at a time. The eggs will take 2 weeks to hatch, so need to be well hidden from scavenger birds in the dense mangrove. Her baby's shells are initially very soft and need time to firm up. So she chooses to have them here, as the mud on the shore will protect them during their lengthy childhood. As the tide returns, these crabs are safe from aerial attacks from the egrets. But now they must be cautious of opportunistic predators from below. The Chinese black sleeper. It resides in the shallow waters around the roots of the mangrove trees. A preying fish found in both marine and fresh waters. During the high tide, its main source of nutrition are crabs. It's the start of another day in the mangrove forests. And those at the top of the food chain and the bottom feeders are all enjoying some respite from the dramas of the day. Feeding time is over for these birds, but only until the next low tide, when a hidden world emerges once more. These mangrove creatures are bound to a cycle of life and death, governed by the rhythm of the moon and waves. China's awe-inspiring and extensive karst landscapes, where the humid climate and plentiful rainwater has been eroding the craggy limestone mountains for millions of years. The water seeping through the rock fissures gradually works its way into the depths of the mountain, creating limestone caverns. An extraordinary world of interlocked underground cavities, subterranean pools of water, and an incredible underground habitat for wildlife. The limestone caverns are inaccessible to most. They are defined by darkness, but they provide a refuge for some. Ancient creatures who've endured hundreds of millions of years of environmental changes. Creatures bizarre in appearance and behaviour. And here, in the dark and dank conditions, they continue their evolution. Near the cave entrance, a giant salamander lurks at the bottom of the water. The largest amphibian in the world, he's a relic from the dinosaur era and can grow up to 2 meters long. He's a carnivore and feeds off insects, millipedes, and even some other amphibians. He's a lazy hunter, lying motionless, camouflaged to look exactly like a rock. until the point when a passerby takes his fancy. Despite his apparently all-seeing, lidless, unblinking eyes, his eyesight is in fact very poor. Instead, he depends on a line of specialized sensory nodes that run from his head to his tail. These are so sensitive he can react to the slightest movement around him. And that's when he jumps into action, striking with speed. After eating a hearty meal, this giant salamander can go without food for 2 or even 3 years. These white filaments are sticky secretions. He can produce them at will to repel predators. And he sheds his skin every 10 to 15 days to stay healthy. No creature is better suited to life in the quiet calm of these caves, which provides this shy and solitary salamander with the isolation he craves. Water here has shaped this subterranean world and brought nutrients to the ecosystem. The salamander population has been in decline since the 1970s due to habitat loss and pollution of rivers. But the clear, calm and untouched waters of the limestone caverns provide a safe home for the giant Chinese salamander. It's autumn on Caohai Lake, a freshwater lake in southwest China's Guizhou province. This is a remote and mountainous province, and Caohai is what's known as a plateau lake up on Weining Mountain. It's a hot destination for migratory birds. 184 bird species live around or visit the lake. Caohai means grass sea, and this name hints at how rich the lake is with aquatic plants. Add this to a mild climate, and it's not surprising that in early spring and late autumn, more than 100,000 birds will migrate here. The open-bill stork, indigenous to India and Southeast Asia, is attracted to the abundance of food here in the grass sea. They are the largest wading bird in the area and are one of the top predators on the lake. And their hunting method is remarkable. They seem to be taking part in a ritualistic display dance. They flap their wings and they stamp their feet on the ground. In fact, they're coordinating their actions and hunting in a pack, trying to scare their prey out from their hideaways in the long grass. In late autumn, the Grass Sea receives its first visitors from the Tibetan Plateau. A flock of bar-headed geese. These are the highest flying birds on the planet. They've even been spotted flying over Mount Everest. When they land on the lake, it's easy to see the two distinctive black bars on their heads that give them their name. A flock of black-necked cranes is joining the thousands of birds already on Sao Hai Lake. They're the only cranes to live on the plateau and will stay here for up to 6 months at a time. After such a long migration, these birds are still getting used to the swampy grounds of the wetlands. The black-necked cranes are attracted to the wetlands too. But they're also lured here by the opportunities offered in the rich farmland surrounding the lake. The birds are unfazed by the presence of humans. But it's a different story when they're confronted by a pair of domestic geese. Despite their greater height and size, the cranes seem confused by these aggressive farmyard birds, and they're unsure how to respond. But the wetland is rich in small fish and shrimps. And thankfully, there's enough for everyone. These birds feast on the grass of the wetlands. Whilst the migrating birds grow more adventurous, setting their sights on the unattended crops of the local farmers. They've long studied his schedule and execute their plan flawlessly. When the farmer has finished turning the soil, the cranes move in en masse. It's mating season. Much to the delight of farmers and local geese here. The cranes and other migratory birds head west to their breeding grounds on the Tibetan Plateau. 3,000 meters above sea level, Qinghai Lake, China's largest saltwater lake, is still frozen. This lake is at a perfect crossroads for many migratory bird routes, with some stopping here temporarily, but many more staying here to breed. Over 100 freshwater rivers and streams flow into the lake. The fluctuating water levels expose new islands for the birds to settle on. The black-necked crane pair are territorial. They choose to construct their nest far from the other cranes. They build it from clumps of grass and algae they've collected from the shoreline. Cormorants form colonies during the breeding season. They return to the same site year after year. This world-famous rock on the west side of the lake has belonged to the cormorants for as long as records go back. Cormorants laying their eggs in this exposed spot must cope with altitude, high winds, and plunging temperatures. But today, as one cormorant glides effortlessly above the blue lake, Qinghai looks like one of the most serene places on Earth. As well as being severely impacted by climate change, wetlands are also an important part of the puzzle to protect against environmental damage. Wetlands act as a natural buffer against the most extreme events, soaking up heavy rainfall, and regulating water flow to protect against floods. The wetlands are an essential border between two worlds, with a unique ecosystem of their own. From wild swampy marshes in eastern China to cultivated rice paddies in the south and west. They're a home for mammals, crustaceans and birds alike, providing nature's creatures with a source of clean drinking water, nutritious food, and shelter on long migrations. Over the last century, 50% of the world's wetlands have vanished. And as mankind has taken from the wetlands, it's time for us to give back and rebuild. Every creature on Earth needs water to live, and where land meets water, there is more life than almost anywhere else on the planet. China, a country the size of Europe, with every kind of landscape. every kind of habitat, every kind of climate, and where animals of many different types rare, exquisite, and endangered live in unique ecosystems, in remote isolation, and alongside people. But today, both these habitats and the extraordinary species who live within them are increasingly faced with challenges. As people race to find solutions, to preserve China's wild beauty. Oceans cover more than 2/3 of our planet's surface, and what lives within them remains largely a mystery. We've explored less than 5% of the world's oceans, and off the coast of China, the Yellow Sea and the South China Sea are rich in beauty, in mysterious creatures, and in extraordinary ecosystems. From the rich diversity of the shoreline to the waters of the wide expanse. From the multicolored glory of the coral reefs to the darkest depths. Thousands of meters below the surface, known as the abyss. This is the South China Sea. These tiny islands are the northern rim of what's known as the Coral Golden Triangle. "30,000 square kilometers of coral reef. One of the most biodiverse places on the planet. Underwater, corals look like a multicolored rock garden of different plants. A miniature forest of brightly colored trees. But in fact, corals are tiny animals called polyps. Their bony skeletons are on the outside of their bodies. And they link up with the skeletons of other polyps to create larger creatures, which then behave as if they were a single organism. They catch plankton to eat with the tentacles around their mouths. Corals grow very slowly. Even the fastest growing will only extend by around 15 centimeters a year. As a result, some coral reefs are extremely old. Experts have worked out that the oldest have taken around 50 million years to form. It's April in the South China Sea. the coral breeding season. When the full moon arrives, it's time for one of nature's most entrancing events. Coral polyps can't move to mate, so the entire colony releases eggs and sperm simultaneously. These float to the surface in a blizzard of colour. They cluster in swarms on the ocean surface. Now they must join together to create embryo coral larvae. In a miracle of nature, the polyp's sperm will only fertilise an egg from a different parent from their own. It's a race against time. Most of these tiny eggs and sperm can only survive for a matter of hours. If they haven't joined together in that time, they will die. But this colorization is deceptive. It's the result of an extraordinary relationship between coral and a single-celled plant called Zooxanthellae. Zooxanthellae is an algae that lives inside the coral, and it's the algae that gives the corals their technicolor brilliance. Coral polyps only get a small proportion of their nutrition needs from plankton. The rest comes from their resident colony of Zooxanthellae that photosynthesize food out of sunlight the way plants do. And that's why corals generally live in shallow water. It's not such a nutritious habitat for them, but there's plenty of sunlight for their Zooxanthellae. Thanks to this special relationship between animal and plant, coral reefs flourish, and so they're able to play a vital role in our oceans. They only cover 1% of the seabed, yet coral reefs are home to a quarter of all marine creatures in the ocean. In fact, coral reefs are not only one of the oldest, they're one of the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth. Home to creatures like this giant clam. It also depends, just like coral, on its resident colony of Zooxanthellae. They provide around 3/4 of its food, and their colour protects the clam from UV radiation. Darting around the reef is a red-toothed triggerfish. It's the star swimmer of all the fish on the reef. Its unusual fins help it execute tight turns and put on sharp bursts of speed. The coral provides shelter for its residents. Crevices and overhangs accommodate nurseries for shoals of young fish. And for a timid clownfish, coral is the perfect hiding place. The spectacular lionfish uses crevices for a different reason: to ambush its prey. The poisonous spikes on its back deter potential attackers. It's the overlord of this territory, with almost no natural enemies. Besides its regular inhabitants, the reef also plays hosts to guests from afar. This ray has come riding on ocean currents. But he won't stay here for long. Today, this beautiful and important habitat is under threat from many directions. This is the crown of thorns starfish. It's the coral's #1 predator. And recently, the number of crown of thorns outbreaks, where their numbers grow exponentially, has been increasing. Scientists aren't sure exactly why, but one reason is the disappearance of its main predator, the triton, the consequence of overfishing. Around the world, more than half our coral reefs are threatened. When corals are under stress, from sea temperature rise, for example, they expel their zooxanthellae. As a result, they lose their colour. It's called coral bleaching. And then, without the algae to help them create food and provide them with oxygen, they die. Now a team of young scientists from the Chinese Academy of Sciences is trying to find ways to restore the coral ecosystem in the South China Sea. In April, the sea here is usually calm, so that makes it the busiest time for the team. Zhang Yuyang and his colleagues need to complete their work here before the summer typhoon season arrives. Their plan is to collect damaged corals from the seabed and then relocate them to safer places where they can flourish. Zhang dives into the water to check whether the location they've identified from the surface is suitable. The water here is clear so the sun can penetrate, and the zooxanthellae will be able to do their work. It's also sheltered from damaging big waves. But there's a problem. The seabed here is sandy. There's nothing for the coral polyps to fasten onto. So Zhang's team have come up with a smart solution. Man-made underwater trees with branches and dangling twigs. They attach the coral at a relatively shallow depth. This way, the sunlight can penetrate and provide the fuel for the zooxanthellae to power the coral's growth. But attaching tree towers to the seabed is no easy task. They have to drive nails 40 centimetres long and 1.8 centimetres thick into the rock. It's skilled work and takes great strength. Normally a diver's tank of air lasts 90 minutes, but it runs out after just 20 when you're doing work like this. Sometimes, if the rock is exceptionally hard, it can take the team an hour to fix a single nail. This forest of artificial trees is a temporary home, a nursery for the damaged corals to grow. In shallower waters, the team build racks for the corals. With the right water temperature and sufficient sunlight, even the smallest coral fragments can survive. These corals were transplanted last April. Already they're larger and beginning to look well established. When the corals in the team's nursery reach 10 centimetres, they will be relocated in places where the coral has died. This was once an expanse of colourful coral reefs, until the crown of thorns starfish arrived. Efforts like these aren't enough to reverse the worldwide destruction of coral reefs. Only by maintaining a healthy marine ecosystem can we create a friendly environment for coral polyps to continue. The greatest construction project on Earth. Sailing northwards from the South China Sea, you arrive at China's East Sea. Here, islands stand high on one of the widest continental shelves in the world. The colour of the water here is a mysterious deep blue. Deterred by rapid currents, fishing boats seldom venture into this area. Plunge into the ocean here, and the seabed is more than 2,000 meters down. Soon darkness reigns. This habitat, the deep ocean, is called the abyss. Compared to the vivid coral of shallower waters, the seabed seems barren, deserted. It seems impossible life could flourish at such depths. Chinese scientists aboard this research vessel will use an underwater robot named Discovery for the very first time to explore these hidden depths. Encased in armour to survive the pressure in the abyss, the robot can dive deep, down to 4,500 metres below the surface. It's armed with spotlights, an ultra-high-definition camera, and a mechanical arm for collecting samples. Discovery can go where humans can't, to bring us back news from an alien world. It's a long journey. The robot descends through the darkness. Every 10 meters of depth generates pressure equivalent to 1 atmosphere. Finally, discovery reaches the seabed. This deep ocean world seems deserted. And then, a fish emerges from the gloom. Then another. Illuminated by Discovery's spotlights, more ghostly inhabitants of this alien land. The seabed is dotted with small, bright white creatures. Immobile. They're sponges. They have the simplest body structure of any multicellular animal. There are very few nutrients here on the seabed. The creatures who live at these depths subsist on what's known as marine snow. Debris from dead animals and plankton falling from above. Sponges have made clever adaptations to this nutrient-poor world. They stay motionless to conserve energy and gather food by simply letting sea currents flow right through their bodies. And yet, even here, where there are so few creatures, there are places that simply teem with life. Clusters of animals, thousands strong. These are yellow-shelled mussels, attaching themselves to this deep ocean rock the same way their shallow water cousins cling to rocks on the shoreline. Moving among the mussels are Alvin shrimp, named after the deep-sea rover Alvin that first spotted them in 1986. There are hundreds of crabs, so shiny and white that they've been given the name porcelain crabs. And these equally strange creatures. With their claws and their 6 legs, they look like hairy crabs. But in fact, they're a species that's also close to the lobster. Most of the creatures living down at these depths are startlingly white. And there's a good reason for this. Growing pigment cells consumes energy. And what's more, far from sunlight, they have no need to protect themselves from harmful UV rays. Life can sustain itself even at these depths. But the reason why there are so many creatures clustered at this precise place on the seabed is remarkable, and was completely unknown until late last century. Like the land, the ocean floor has valleys and mountains. It even has volcanoes. Rifts in the seabed where heat from deep inside the earth pours out. These pools of black and white smoke are in fact hot fluid, bursting out of the volcano as a mixture of lava and seawater. These underwater volcanoes are known as black smokers. And they are the reason why there is such a proliferation of creatures here. The water here is 350 degrees Celsius, and it contains large quantities of metal sulfides. Bacteria that thrive on heat gather around these black smokers. They take the minerals and chemical compounds spewing from the vents and turn them into chemical energy. Then the microbes release new compounds that the other residents of the seabed can use to feed themselves. These bacteria that make life here possible are known as extremophiles, lovers of extreme conditions. And they may have been among the earliest forms of life on Earth. Their work, turning volcanic plumes into fuel on the seabed, has certainly given rise to some bizarre-looking creatures. And for the moment, they're a bit of a mystery, even to the scientists studying them. To learn more about these life forms, our team of scientists have sent the ROV Discovery on a mission down to the Black Smokers to collect samples of all different kinds for further study. Most precious of all, they seek samples of the unique creatures which cluster here, around the hydrothermal vents. It's a tricky and delicate operation. They must take care not to injure the creatures they collect. Sometimes the team get lucky, and sometimes they don't. The team carefully unload the samples brought back from the depths. Clues to help us understand a habitat that's one of the strangest on the planet. It's November, and whooper swans have flown in from the north as temperatures begin to fall across northern China and Siberia. They'll spend the whole winter here in shallow lagoons off the Yellow Sea. This is the largest wintering site for the whooper swan in all of Asia. And what draws them to these lagoons is this. Seagrass. A meadow. Underwater. Swans are among the hundreds of species that feed on this flowering underwater plant. And on the insects and algae that cling to it. Being a buffet for birds, fish and turtles is only one of the seagrass's many services to the sea. This meadow creates oxygen. It slows down coastal erosion. It soaks up nutrient runoff from farmland. And it provides a nursery for all kinds of sea creatures. This baby bass is only 3 months old. The seagrass meadow is the perfect home for him. There's plenty of plankton for him to eat here. And he can hide from predators, well camouflaged by the play of sunlight and shadow on the long grass. Just like grass on land, seagrass withers in autumn and is washed ashore. People in this part of northern China have always used seagrass to thatch their homes. First, they dry the seagrass on the sand. To get a good thatch, they layer it on the roof, up to 4 meters thick in places. A single thatched roof can take 5,000 kilos of dried seagrass. But once it's finished, this roof will be moth resistant and will keep the house cool in summer and cozy in winter. Seagrass is in decline worldwide. The main cause is human activity. Overfishing and fertilizers leaking from the land into the sea. This leads to blooms of algae, which block the sunlight seagrass needs to survive. Biologists from the Marine Research Institute, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, come here every other month to collect samples of seagrass. They transplant it to areas where the plant is in decline. They hope to turn this underwater desert into a magical underwater prairie. The tide is coming in. When it reaches high tide, it's time for the fishing boats of Huangshan village in Shandong province to set sail. They head out to an area offshore where they previously placed their nets. The nets are left hanging from floats. They're hoping to catch their ocean-going prey. Jellyfish. Jellyfish are one of the oldest creatures in our seas. They evolved at least 650 million years ago. They live in every ocean, from coastal waters to the deep sea. They're carnivorous and are voracious eaters. As they have few natural enemies, jellyfish are dominant in the ocean food chain. In less than 30 minutes, the boats are fully loaded, and the fishermen head back to shore, laden with their catch. Sometimes, when conditions are favourable, jellyfish numbers will suddenly increase dramatically. It's known as a jellyfish bloom. In the past, this would happen here every 20 years or so. But recently, it started happening every year. In July, there's a fishing ban in the Yellow Sea. But this research boat has been granted access for a special mission. On board, a team of marine scientists who are hoping to find out the reasons behind these repeated jellyfish blooms. A jellyfish's body contains a large volume of water, so it's very difficult to detect them using optical or acoustic instruments. So the scientists use an old-fashioned method. They drop their net over the side and at regular intervals examine what they've caught. After half an hour, they pull the net out of the water. They haul in dozens of jellyfish and just a few crabs and smaller fish. It's the same story next time, and the time after that. At last, a net that's bulging with all types of fish and few jellyfish. This simple exercise clearly shows that where jellyfish are abundant, few other sea creatures can flourish. Scientists from the Marine Institute, Chinese Academy of Sciences, are focusing their research on the early stages of the jellyfish life cycle. The larvae of jellyfish are called hydra. They're tiny and start life attached to reefs. They can lie dormant for up to 40 years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Hydra can reproduce asexually. This means 100,000 germ cells can become several billion hydrae. And through further division, can reach dozens of billions. Whether they lie on the seabed or develop into jellyfish depends on the sea temperature. Jellyfish do have natural enemies, like this turtle. But overfishing of tuna and other big fish has enabled jellyfish numbers to increase. And as they can thrive in warmer temperatures and lower oxygen, they flourish at the expense of other sea creatures. For farmers, spring is the season to sow, but for these fishermen, it's time to harvest. 80% of the world's kelp is produced in China. The Sango Bay at the western edge of the Yellow Sea produces China's best kelp. This giant seaweed isn't native to China, but it grows well here. Fishermen fasten kelp to ropes floating on the surface. This way, the seaweed is more exposed to the sun, which it needs for photosynthesis. The fishermen must gather in all the kelp by June. Once the sea temperature rises above 15 degrees, the seaweed will start to rot. Kelp is in demand as a vegetable, but it's also used as a biofuel. Artificially raised kelp like this grows thicker and wider leaves than wild kelp. But it's underwater that the secret to this kelp farm's success can be seen. Between the kelp leaves are nets, and inside the nets are scallops. Kelp and scallop turn out to be perfect neighbours. As the kelp photosynthesizes, it absorbs carbon dioxide and releases oxygen, which the scallops need to grow. Then the scallops excrete nitrogen and phosphorus, essential in turn for the healthy growth of the kelp. The fishermen ferry their harvest ashore and dry it on the sand. The ocean is mankind's most precious food bank. Unlike seasonal crops on land, marine food is available year-round, even in the depths of a severe winter. In China's northern Yellow Sea, in midwinter, fishermen dive for a delicacy that's greatly sought after across Asia: the sea cucumber. It's been called the living fossil of the ocean, as sea cucumbers have lived on the ocean bed for 600 million years. Today, below a depth of 5,000 meters, they make up 90% of all life on the ocean floor. In the shallower waters here, divers can pick the sea cucumbers right off the seabed, 20 meters down. The sea cucumber has no brain and only limited ability to sense light. It has few weapons against potential predators. And it can only squirm along the seabed, slower than a snail. But sea cucumbers play a crucial role in the ocean ecosystem. They are the cleaners of the seabed. They eat the decaying matter that collects there, breaking it down in their digestive system. Without sea cucumbers, the ocean would be a much dirtier place and the water less clear. The diver returns with a full load. Now the fishermen must sort the sea cucumbers according to size. They'll only keep those longer than 30 centimeters. The rest they'll throw back into the sea. With a new tank of air, the diver plunges back into the water again for round 2. Oceans cover 2/3 of our planet's surface, and yet for most of us, they are truly a hidden world. This is a complex ecosystem, beautiful and wild. On China's southern shoreline, warm shallows, bathed in life-giving sunlight, give rise to spectacular corals and offer safe havens for sea creatures of all kinds. In the deepest stretches of the Yellow Sea, forever plunged in darkness, lie deserts and volcanoes. China's seas are home to life in all its diversity. Some animals so extraordinary that they stretch our imagination and challenge the assumptions of science. Others both charming and familiar. All bear witness to the beauty and the complexity that is China's ocean world.